Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to be tackling something that might sound a little dry at first,
Yeah,
the Constitution of Lesotho. But trust me, this isn't just some dusty old document.
right.
It's like the rule book for an entire nation. And believe me,
Yeah,
it gets way more interesting than you might think.
you're absolutely right.
Sure.
Constitutions are like a nation's DNA.
Okay.
They lay out the blueprint for how a country is run.
Yeah.
From the big picture stuff like the structure of the government, all the way down to the nitty-gritty details of individual rights and freedoms.
You got the real deal for us today, right? Like actual excerpts from the Lesotho Constitution?
That's right.
Okay, cool.
We're not dealing with summaries or interpretations here.
Right.
We're going straight to the source to uncover what makes this Constitution tick.
I love it. Okay, so before we get into the specifics, can you give us a quick overview of how the Lesotho Constitution is organized? Like, what are the main areas it covers?
Well, think of it like a well-organized textbook with chapters dedicated to different aspects of government and society.
Okay.
You've got chapters on the monarchy, parliament, the judiciary, fundamental human rights, and even things like citizenship and finance.
So it's pretty comprehensive.
It is,
Yeah.
and the level of detail is impressive.
Okay.
It's not just about lofty principles.
Right.
It gets into the nuts and bolts of how things actually work in Lesotho.
Let's start with something that always piques my curiosity.
Sure.
The monarchy.
Okay.
Lesotho has a king, but I have to admit, I always pictured it as a mostly ceremonial role.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate?
Not quite.
Okay.
The Lesotho Constitution actually gives the king some real power,
Okay.
albeit within a constitutional framework.
Uh-huh.
He's the head of state representing Lesotho on the world stage,
Right.
and he plays a key role in the legislative process.
Oh.
For example, any law passed by parliament needs the king's assent to become official.
So it's more than just ribbon cutting and waving to the crowds. Okay.
All right, and when it comes to choosing the next king,
Yeah.
things get even more fascinating.
Okay.
It's not just a simple matter of the eldest son inheriting the throne.
Right.
The Lesotho Constitution gives a special role to the College of Chiefs.
The College of Chiefs. Who are they?
Think of them as the guardians of Lesotho's traditions and customs.
Okay.
They're a group of 22 principal chiefs who play a vital role in preserving the country's cultural heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And when a king passes away, it's the College of Chiefs who designates the heir according to Lesotho's customary law.
So it's a blend of traditional practices and modern constitutional rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty unique.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if the heir is still a minor when the king dies?
The Lesotho Constitution has a plan for that, too.
Okay.
They appoint a regent to step in and exercise the king's powers until the heir comes of age.
Okay.
It's like having a temporary caretaker for the monarchy,
Right.
ensuring a smooth transition of power.
Wow. They really thought of everything. It sounds like the king has a lot of responsibilities. But what happens if a king isn't well fit to rule?
That's where the concept of checks and balances comes in.
Okay.
The Lesotho Constitution, while recognizing the king's authority, also makes it clear that he's not above the law.
Wait, so you can actually remove a king? I'm guessing it's not easy.
You're right, it's not a simple process.
Right.
There are safeguards in place to prevent abuse.
Sure.
For example, the king enjoys immunity from lawsuits and criminal prosecution while in office.
So there's a certain level of protection for the king, but what if there are serious concerns about his ability to rule?
In those cases, the prime minister can bring the matter to parliament.
Okay.
Both houses of parliament,
Uh-huh.
the National Assembly and the Senate, have to vote on whether to remove the king.
Wow.
And if both houses agree, he's out.
So the king, while powerful, is ultimately accountable to the people through their elected representatives.
Exactly. It's a fascinating example of how the Lesotho Constitution balances traditional authority with democratic principles.
It is. All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about parliament itself.
Okay.
What's the setup there?
Lesotho, like many countries, has a bicameral parliament.
Okay.
This means it has two separate chambers, the Senate and the National Assembly. Think of it like a two-headed legislative beast,
Okay.
each head with its own distinct role and composition.
Two heads are better than one, as they say, right?
Right.
But seriously, why have two separate houses? What's the logic behind that?
The two houses provide a system of checks and balances,
Okay.
ensuring that legislation is carefully considered and debated from different perspectives. The National Assembly is the more directly representative body,
Right.
with members elected by the people.
Okay.
It's the voice of the people, so to speak.
That makes sense. What about the Senate?
The Senate is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
It's a mix of appointed chiefs, nominated senators, and some elected members.
Oh, wow.
It's designed to bring together traditional leadership, expertise from various fields, and a touch of democratic representation.
So it's a blend of different voices and perspectives.
All coming together to shape Lesotho's laws.
Precisely. It's a unique approach that reflects Lesotho's efforts to balance its rich cultural heritage with modern principles of governance.
Interesting. Speaking of shaping laws,
Yeah.
let's talk about elections.
Okay.
Who gets to vote in Lesotho and who's eligible to run for office?
The Lesotho Constitution gets pretty specific about this.
Okay.
To vote, you have to be a Lesotho citizen and at least 21 years old.
Okay.
And you have to be registered in your constituency.
Right.
There are also a few disqualifications.
Disqualifications? Like what?
Well, for example, you can't be a registered voter if you've pledged allegiance to a foreign power or if you're under a death sentence.
Makes sense. What about running for office? Are there similar qualifications?
You bet.
Okay.
To be a member of either the National Assembly or the Senate, you have to meet the same basic criteria as a voter.
Right.
But there are a few additional requirements for candidates.
Like what? Well, for instance, they need to be able to communicate effectively in either Sesotho or English, the official languages of Lesotho.
Right.
After all, you need to be able to participate in parliamentary debates and represent your constituents effectively.
I guess that goes without saying.
The Constitution also dives into the nitty-gritty details of things like how electoral districts are determined and the role of the chief electoral officer who oversees the whole election process.
Okay.
It's all about creating a system that's as fair and transparent as possible.
Sounds like they've really tried to create a robust and well-defined electoral system.
They certainly have, and that attention to detail is a recurring theme in the Lesotho Constitution. They don't just lay out broad principles.
Yeah.
They get into the specifics of how those principles are put into practice.
Okay, so we've covered the monarchy, parliament, and elections. But any good constitution needs to address the heart of the matter.
Right.
The rights and freedoms of the people.
Absolutely. And this is where Chapter 2 of the Lesotho Constitution takes center stage.
Okay.
It's entirely dedicated to outlining the fundamental human rights and freedoms guaranteed to everyone in Lesotho.
Let's dig into that a little deeper.
Sure.
What are some of the key rights that the Lesotho Constitution specifically protects?
Well, it covers a wide range of rights.
Yeah.
And they're articulated in very clear terms. For example, it guarantees the right to life. Meaning the government can't simply take someone's life arbitrarily.
Right.
You can't be executed without a proper trial and a conviction in a court of law.
Right.
It's a fundamental protection against state-sanctioned killing.
That's a pretty big one. What other rights are explicitly spelled out?
Well, there's the right to personal liberty, which means you can't be unlawfully arrested or detained.
Right.
You have the right to be informed of the reasons for your arrest.
Yeah.
The right to be brought before a judge promptly.
Yeah.
And the right to challenge your detention in court. These are crucial safeguards against government overreach and abuse of power.
The central protections, for sure. What about freedom of movement?
That's covered too.
Oh.
Everyone in Lesotho has the right to travel freely throughout the country. Reside wherever they choose.
Right.
And even leave and enter the country without arbitrary restrictions.
Right.
This is something we often take for granted, but it's a right that's denied in many parts of the world.
It's a right that allows you to build a life on your own terms without being unjustly confined or restricted. What about freedom of expression?
Yeah.
Is that protected under the Lesotho Constitution?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Constitution explicitly protects freedom of expression, which includes the freedom to hold your own opinions, receive and share information, and even criticize the government.
Wow.
This is a cornerstone of any democratic society,
allowing
for the free flow of ideas and open debate.
Those are all essential freedoms.
Yeah.
But are there any limits to them? Like, can you just say anything you want, even if it's harmful or incites violence?
That's a good question, and the Constitution recognizes that there can be limitations to these rights.
Okay.
Particularly when it comes to things like protecting national security,
Yeah.
public order, or the rights and reputations of others.
Sure.
For example, hate speech or incitement to violence would not be protected under the Freedom of Expression Clause.
So it's a balancing act.
Exactly. The right to peaceful assembly, for instance, allows people to gather and protest, but the government can impose reasonable restrictions if necessary to protect public safety or prevent the infringement of other people's freedoms.
Right.
It's about finding that sweet spot between individual liberty and the needs of society as a whole.
It sounds like they've really tried to find that balance between individual rights and the common good. Are there any other rights specifically mentioned in the Constitution?
Oh, there are many more.
Okay.
Freedom of association, the right to education, the right to own property. These are all protected.
Okay. And the Constitution also recognizes that there might be times when these rights need to be temporarily restricted, such as during wartime or a state of emergency.
So even in extraordinary circumstances, the Constitution provides a framework for how to handle those situations.
That's right. It's designed to be a steady hand,
Yeah.
guiding the country through both calm and turbulent times.
This is all incredibly interesting. We've talked about the king, parliament, elections, and the rights of the people. But does the Constitution actually go further and create specific government institutions?
Oh, absolutely. And this is where it gets even more fascinating.
Okay.
We see the Constitution not just defining principles, but actually giving birth to the institutions that will uphold those principles.
So what are some of the key institutions that it creates?
Well, there's the Public Service Commission,
Okay.
which is responsible for ensuring a fair and unbiased public service.
Right.
It's all about promoting meritocracy and professionalism within the government,
Okay.
making sure the most qualified individuals are serving the people. So no favoritism or cronyism.
That's the idea.
Right.
The Constitution strives to prevent that. It's about having a public service that truly serves the people,
Right.
not just the powerful or well-connected.
What about the legal system? Does the Constitution establish any institutions related to that?
It does. It establishes the Office of the Attorney General, who acts as the government's chief legal advisor and has authority over public prosecutions.
So kind of like a legal superhero fighting for justice on behalf of the people.
You could say that. And then there's the Director of Public Prosecutions, who's directly responsible for initiating and overseeing criminal proceedings.
Okay, so there's a clear distinction between advising the government on legal matters and actually prosecuting criminal cases.
Yes, and that separation of powers is crucial.
Right.
It helps ensure that prosecutions are carried out independently, free from undue influence from the government.
Are there any other institutions that stand out as particularly important?
Definitely. The Auditor General plays a crucial role in ensuring government accountability. They audit government funds, making sure the money is being used properly and transparently.
Right.
Think of them as the financial watchdog sniffing out any corruption or misuse of public funds.
So keeping an eye on the money trail, making sure there's no funny business going on.
Exactly. And then there's the Ombudsman, which is one of the most interesting institutions established by the Constitution.
The Ombudsman, what do they do?
The Ombudsman acts as an independent investigator of complaints about government actions.
Okay.
So if you believe you've been treated unfairly by a government official or agency,
Right.
you can take your complaint to the Ombudsman.
Okay.
They have the power to investigate and recommend solutions,
Right.
holding the government accountable to the people it serves.
Wow, that's a powerful tool for citizens to have. It's like having a dedicated advocate, ensuring they're not being taken advantage of by the government.
Precisely. It's a testament to the Lesotho Constitution's commitment to fairness and accountability.
This deep dive into the Lesotho Constitution has been incredible. It's clear that a lot of thought and care went into crafting this document.
It really is a fascinating document reflecting Lesotho's unique history, culture, and aspirations for the future.
I'm ready to dive even deeper, but I think we need to take a quick pause here.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll continue our journey through the Lesotho Constitution. Be tuned.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We're continuing our exploration of the Lesotho Constitution, and this time we're going beyond the nuts and bolts of government structure
Right.
and diving into something a bit more philosophical.
That's right. We're moving on to Chapter 3,
Okay.
which deals with something called the Principles of State Policy.
Okay.
It's where the Constitution lays out a vision for Lesotho's future, outlining the values and goals that should guide the government's actions.
Oh, principles of state policy. That sounds pretty broad. What exactly does that entail?
Think of it as a set of guiding stars for the nation.
Yeah.
It's not about specific laws or regulations, but rather a declaration of the kind of society Lesotho aspires to be. It covers everything from social justice to economic development to environmental protection.
So it's like the Constitution's dream board for Lesotho's future.
Exactly. And the first principle mentioned sets the tone for everything that follows.
Okay.
A commitment to equality and justice for all citizens.
That sounds like a solid foundation for any nation.
It is. And the Constitution doesn't just stop at equal rights on paper.
Right.
It emphasizes the importance of taking active measures to promote equality of opportunity.
Okay.
Particularly for disadvantaged groups, it's about ensuring that everyone has a genuine chance to participate fully in society and reach their full potential.
So it's not just about leveling the playing field, but also about giving everyone the tools they need to succeed.
Precisely. And that includes economic opportunities as well.
Okay.
The Constitution encourages citizens to acquire property, including land, houses, and the tools they need for their trades, empowering them to build a better life for themselves and their families.
That's interesting. It suggests that economic empowerment is seen as a crucial part of true equality and freedom.
Absolutely. And these principles go beyond just social and economic issues.
Yeah.
The Constitution also addresses things like healthcare and education.
Let's talk about healthcare. What kind of vision does the Constitution paint for that?
It recognizes healthcare as a fundamental right, stating that all citizens should have access to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health.
So it's not just about treating people when they get sick, but about creating a system that promotes overall well-being.
Exactly. And the Constitution gets specific listing policy goals like reducing infant mortality, improving public health services, and making sure medical care is available to all.
It's a pretty ambitious agenda. What about education? What does the Constitution say about that?
Education is another area where the Constitution sets high standards.
Okay.
It calls for making education available to all, emphasizing that primary education should be both compulsory and free. It recognizes that an educated citizenry is vital for a healthy democracy and a thriving society.
So every child in Lesotho, regardless of background, has the right to a basic education.
That's the goal. And it's not just about basic literacy. The Constitution envisions education as a means of developing well-rounded individuals, fostering critical thinking skills, and instilling respect for human rights.
It sounds like they're really aiming to create an education system that prepares young people to be active and engaged citizens.
That's a key part of it, and recognizing that not everyone thrives in a traditional academic setting.
Yeah.
The Constitution also calls for providing various types of education, including vocational and technical training, to cater to the diverse needs and talents of the people.
So it's about equipping people with the skills they need to succeed in life, not just in the classroom. What about the environment? Does the Constitution address that at all?
It does, and in a way that reflects a growing global awareness of the importance of sustainability. It explicitly calls for protecting and enhancing Lesotho's natural and cultural environment for the benefit of both present and future generations.
So sustainability is built into the very fabric of the Constitution.
You could say that it recognizes that we have a responsibility to care for the environment, not just for our own sake, but for the generations who come after us.
All these principles are incredibly important.
Yeah.
But I have to ask,
Yeah.
Are they actually enforceable? I mean, can someone go to court and say, hey, the government isn't living up to these principles?
That's where things get a little tricky. The Constitution explicitly states that these principles of state policy aren't directly enforceable by the courts.
What?
They're not legally binding in the same way that other provisions of the Constitution are.
Wait, so there's just suggestions, nice ideas, but not something you can actually hold the government accountable for?
Not exactly. While they might not have the same legal weight as other parts of the Constitution,
Okay.
they're meant to be more than just empty words. Think of them as a moral compass for the government. A set of aspirations that citizens can use to hold their leaders accountable.
So it's more about public pressure and political accountability than legal enforcement.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Citizens can use these principles to push their elected officials to enact policies that reflect these values. They can point to these principles during elections, demanding that candidates commit to upholding them.
It's a fascinating way to shape the direction of a nation, not just through legal constraints, but through a shared vision for the future.
Exactly. It acknowledges that a constitution isn't just a legal document. It's a reflection of a nation's values, its hopes, and its dreams for a better future.
Okay, so we've explored the structure of government, the rights of the people, and now these guiding principles for the nation. What else is there to uncover in this deep dive into the Lesotho Constitution?
Well, there's a whole chapter dedicated to citizenship, outlining who is considered a citizen of Lesotho and how citizenship can be acquired or lost.
Okay.
It gets into the nitty-gritty of belonging, who gets a say in how the country is run and who's entitled to certain rights and protections.
This is getting more and more interesting. Citizenship is a fundamental concept, but it's not always straightforward. Let's delve into that right after a quick word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of the Lesotho Constitution, and this time we're tackling something that might seem pretty basic at first, the concept of citizenship. It might seem like a simple idea, but it gets surprisingly complex when you really start digging into it.
You're right. Citizenship is at the heart of what it means to belong to a nation. It defines who has a voice and how the country is run, who is entitled to certain rights and protections, and who's considered part of the national fabric.
So how does the Lesotho Constitution approach this whole idea of citizenship? Who are the lucky folks who get to call themselves Basotho?
Well, Chapter 4 of the Constitution lays out the rules of the game, so to speak.
Okay.
It starts by recognizing everyone who was already a citizen under the previous law. The Lesotho Citizenship Order of 1971, it's a way of ensuring a smooth transition and acknowledging those who are already considered part of the nation.
Okay, that makes sense. What about people born in Lesotho after the Constitution came into effect? Are they automatically citizens?
In most cases, yes. The Constitution grants citizenship to anyone born in Lesotho after its implementation, regardless of their parents' citizenship. It's a principle known as birthright citizenship, and it's pretty common in many countries.
So being born on Lesotho soil is basically your ticket to citizenship. But you mentioned there are some exceptions.
Right. There are a few cases where being born in Lesotho doesn't automatically make you a citizen. For example, if your parents are foreign diplomats stationed in Lesotho, you wouldn't automatically become a Lesotho citizen even if you were born there.
Interesting. So your parents' status can sometimes trump the whole born on the soil thing. What about people born outside of Lesotho? Can they become citizens?
Absolutely. The Lesotho Constitution allows for citizenship by descent. So if one of your parents is a Lesotho citizen, you're automatically a citizen too, even if you were born in another country.
Right.
It's a way of recognizing the importance of family ties and acknowledging that citizenship can be passed down through generations.
That makes sense. It's acknowledging that your connection to a country can go beyond just where you happen to be born.
Exactly. And there's another pathway to citizenship.
Okay.
Marriage. If a woman marries a Lesotho citizen, she's entitled to apply for citizenship through registration.
So you've got birthright, descent, and marriage. That covers a lot of ground. But I'm curious about dual citizenship.
Yeah.
How does the Lesotho Constitution handle that?
That's a great question. The Constitution generally discourages dual citizenship.
Okay.
If you're a Lesotho citizen and you acquire citizenship in another country after you turn 21, you're expected to renounce that other citizenship.
So you have to pick a side. No hedging your bets with two passports?
In most cases, yes. The idea is to ensure that citizens are fully committed to Lesotho and don't have divided loyalties. Of course, there are some exceptions, especially if renouncing your other citizenship is impossible or extremely difficult under the laws of that other country.
So they're not completely inflexible, it sounds like. They recognize that there are real-world complexities when it comes to citizenship.
They do, and they've also built in some flexibility in terms of who can grant citizenship.
Okay.
The Constitution gives Parliament the power to make additional provisions for acquiring Lesotho citizenship.
Right.
Even in cases that don't fall under the standard rules.
So there's a little wiggle room for exceptional cases. What about the flip side? Can Lesotho take away your citizenship?
Yes. In certain circumstances, Parliament has the power to revoke citizenship if someone acquired it fraudulently.
Right.
Or if they engage in activities that are deemed harmful to the state, like treason or terrorism.
So citizenship is a privilege, not just a right. And there are consequences if you betray the trust that comes with it.
That's right. Citizenship comes with both rights and responsibilities, and the Lesotho Constitution makes that clear.
Wow, this deep dive into the Lesotho Constitution has been fascinating. We've covered so much ground, from the role of the king to the workings of Parliament to the fundamental rights of the people. And now this exploration of citizenship. It's incredible how much detail and thought went into crafting this document.
It really is a testament to the enduring power of constitutions to shape societies, protect individual rights, and lay out a vision for the future.
And as we've seen, the Lesotho Constitution isn't just a dry legal text. It reflects the country's unique history, culture, and aspirations. It's a living document that continues to shape the nation's journey.
I couldn't agree more. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd like to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question. How does the Lesotho Constitution compare to the Constitution of your own country? What similarities and differences do you find most interesting?
That's a great question. I encourage all of you to take a look at your own Constitution and see how it stacks up. You might be surprised by what you discover, and who knows, maybe you'll be inspired to do your own deep dive into the fascinating world of constitutions.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning.
That's all the time we have for today. We'll be back soon with another fascinating deep dive. Until then, stay curious.